The moon hangs low over a shattered European landscape, casting silver streaks across a restless river. Smoke curls from distant artillery strikes, mingling with the mist rising from the water. On the riverbank, shadows of men move swiftly, carrying beams, ropes, and dreams heavier than steel. They said it couldn't be done, the narrator's voice cuts through the night. Rivers were thought to be barriers walls that no army could cross overnight. But when the Allies needed speed, when time itself became the enemy, American engineers refused to wait. Across the water, the Germans fortify their positions, searchlights scanning the dark, machine guns itching to tear through any who dare approach. Every river bend is a trap, every current a potential grave. But on the opposite bank, the hum of determination grows louder than the roar of war. From the shadowed bank, beams are measured and slotted into place with precision only desperation can forge. The soldiers move like clockwork, each man a link in a chain of ingenuity and courage. Mud clings to boots, sweat drips into cold, dark water, and yet the rhythm never falters. They called these men engineers, the narrator continues, but tonight they were magicians, turning wood and steel into lifelines, into roads over water, into hope itself. A floating pontoon rocks gently against the current. A crane hoists a section of bridge over the river, each movement deliberate, calculated, yet defiant in the face of danger. Explosions echo in the distance, reminding everyone that each second counts. Yet, despite the chaos, the engineers press on silent, relentless, unstoppable. And as the first sections of bridge touch the far bank, a fragile line of steel and timber becomes more than construction. It becomes a statement: we will cross. We will advance. No river will stop us. This night is more than engineering. It is courage welded to necessity, vision fused with sweat. A river once thought impassable is about to become the stage for an American miracle. The camera pans along the misted water, revealing the glint of steel, the rhythm of human hands, the unwavering determination etched into every face. The narrator whispers. Overnight, they would build a bridge. Overnight, they would turn fear into progress. Overnight, American ingenuity would shock the defenders who believed the rivers were theirs to hold. And in the shadows, the first glimmers of a new day reflect off water and timber alike the promise of movement, of momentum, of war being rewritten, one beam at a time.
The German advantage. The rivers of Europe were lined with steel and stone, and the Germans believed them to be untouchable fortresses. On the far bank, bunkers bristle with artillery, machine guns crisscross the landscape, and the shadow of the Wehrmacht stretched like a dark curtain over the water. Every river crossing was anticipated. Every pontoon, every log, every soldier attempting to ford the waters would be met with fire. The German commanders were meticulous, confident. They had studied maps, calculated currents, and stationed observation posts at every strategic point. To them, rivers were more than obstacles. They were natural fortifications, walls reinforced by men and steel. From above, reconnaissance planes swept the skies, noting the slightest movement along the banks. Snipers found their perch among twisted trees and shattered ruins, scanning the muddy shores for any sign of preparation. Patrol boats glided along the currents, their dark silhouettes barely visible, ready to strike at any unauthorized movement. Time was on their side, the narrator intones. Every night that passed without an Allied crossing strengthened the illusion. The rivers could not be breached. And yet, across the water, shadows moved small, agile, and determined. The Germans saw only fleeting glimpses, a beam lifted, a rope tied, a splash against the current. They underestimated what was coming. They believed that brute force, fortified positions, and disciplined firepower would be enough to hold the river, and in their arrogance, they dismissed the quiet, persistent hum of American engineers preparing to defy every expectation. Artillery shells thudded into the riverbank at intervals, sending plumes of mud and water skyward, a constant reminder of the deadly precision the Germans wielded. Mines floated beneath the surface, barely visible, waiting to shred anything that dared approach. Every crossing seemed impossible. Every second of delay made the river more formidable. Yet, in the darkness, a different kind of calculation was underway. Engineers measured, marked, and planned with surgical precision, studying currents, angles, and the weaknesses in German defenses. Where the Germans saw an immovable barrier, the Americans saw potential a puzzle to be solved by ingenuity, courage, and speed. They had rivers, they had firepower, they had confidence, the narrator continues. But confidence is brittle. Rivers are conquerable. Fortresses can be outflanked. And under the cover of night, those advantages can evaporate in the face of human resolve. From the misted banks, German lookouts squint through telescopes, unaware that their mastery of terrain is about to be challenged. In the distance, the low murmur of engines, the shuffle of boots, and the clink of metal signal the beginning of a movement they cannot yet comprehend. Every gun, every bunker, every calculated defense counted for something but not enough. The Americans were coming, and what the Germans did not know, what they could not imagine, was that ingenuity moves faster than fear, and courage flows stronger than any river. The camera drifts along the fortified banks of steel, stone, shadow, and water, capturing both the might of the German defense and the anticipation building quietly on the other side. In the night, the stage is set. The river is ready to be challenged. And the battle for momentum is about to begin. The American engineer's strategy. The moon hung low over the river, silvering the water with an eerie calm. On the nearby bank, a small army moved, not tanks, not guns, but men with ropes, pulleys, and timber. They were engineers, but in that moment, they were something more, architects of audacity, sculptors of the impossible. Every crossing is a problem to solve, the narrator begins, voice steady but charged with tension. And these men solved problems the way a maestro commands an orchestra, each movement deliberate, precise, and vital. Blueprints unfurled on muddy tables. Sketches of pontoon bridges, collapsible structures, and floating platforms became lifelines of war. Calculations were whispered in the night, voices low but confident, eyes scanning the current, the banks, the enemy positions across the water. They knew the rivers were wide, their currents treacherous, their banks lined with fire. And yet, where others saw impossible odds, they saw opportunity. Every piece of timber, every inch of cable, every rivet placed in the dark was a calculated strike against the German assumption that the river was untouchable. In the shadows, teams worked silently but urgently. Pulleys groaned under tension, metal clanged, and the smell of oil mixed with the mud. Men braced against the current, their muscles straining, their faces etched with determination. Every mistake could mean disaster. Every success meant the chance to turn the tide. They didn't just build bridges, the narrator intones, the words heavy with reverence. They built hope, they built surprise, they built the weapon that would shatter the German confidence in hours. Some engineers scouted the far bank, studying the enemy's guns and observation posts. Others assembled prefabricated pontoons, each section a modular promise of mobility and speed. Men waded into icy currents, anchoring sections under the cover of darkness, their reflections shimmering like ghosts in the river's black surface. And always, the ticking clock reminded them of the stakes. Enemy patrols could appear at any moment. A single flare, a single burst of gunfire, and the river could become a tomb. Yet the engineers pressed on, driven not by the lure of glory, but by necessity and by a deep, unspoken knowledge that every bridge laid tonight would save countless lives tomorrow. Strategy is more than plans on paper. Strategy is courage under pressure, creativity under threat, and precision when failure means death. The Americans understood that, and in every whispered instruction, in every hammer strike, in every cautious shove of a pontoon into the river, they turned strategy into action. Across the water, German forces remained unaware. They imagined defenses unbreached, their confidence absolute. But on this night, the Americans were moving with purpose, their ingenuity a quiet storm growing along the riverbank. Every calculated step, every improvised solution, was a strike not of bullets, but of brilliance. And as dawn approached, the first sections of the bridge floated into position, almost imperceptibly against the currents. The narrator's voice softens, yet carries an unshakable awe. In the dark, with only moonlight and sheer resolve, the engineers created the impossible. And when the sun rose, it would reveal not just a bridge of timber and steel but a bridge across fear, across rivers, and across the expectation that some obstacles are unconquerable. The camera drifts along the near bank, catching glimpses of men in wet uniforms, ropes straining under tension, and timber slowly forming a lifeline across the water. The stage is nearly set. The river, once a fortress, now faces the coming storm. The nighttime miracle. The river was a ribbon of darkness, stretching endlessly between two enemy-held banks. Stars blinked faintly overhead, but it was the glint of metal and the shimmer of moonlight on water that guided the men. The engineers moved like shadows, silent but relentless, as if the night itself had lent them its patience and cunning. They said it couldn't be done, the narrator begins, voice tight with awe. They said no man could build a bridge under fire, in hours, in the dead of night. And yet, there it was, the miracle in motion. Pontoons slipped into the river, rocking gently against the current. Men waded thigh-deep, dragging timber, securing anchors, fitting planks with meticulous precision. Their breath formed clouds in the cold night air, mingling with the scent of wet wood and iron. Every movement had to be perfect. One misstep could snap a cable, send a pontoon adrift, and alert the enemy to the audacity unfolding before them. Amid the shadows, leaders whispered coordinates and timing, gestures cutting through the dark like blades. Radios hummed softly, giving cryptic updates that could mean life or death. Engineers exchanged nods, words unnecessary. Their rhythm was instinctual, honed by months of training and the urgency of war. The river became their canvas, the narrator continues, and every section laid, every cable tightened, was a brushstroke of genius and courage. A sudden ripple caught the attention of a sentry across the river. For a heartbeat, silence hung in the air, heavy as fog. Then, like clockwork, the engineers adapted, sliding a pontoon slightly, adjusting a tether, absorbing the threat before it could become a disaster. This was not brute force. This was war as art, fluid, responsive, and daring. Time accelerated. Sections connected, timber locked into place, pontoons forming a continuous line across the water. The current tugged relentlessly, but the engineers pushed harder, leaning into the river, muscles screaming, eyes fixed on the invisible horizon of completion. Sweat and river water mixed, streaking their faces with mud and determination. And all the while, the German defenders slept, oblivious to the lifeline creeping toward them. Every bolt turned, every plank secured, was a silent blow against the enemy's expectation of safety. Then, the final piece clicked into place. The bridge, an improbable skeleton of wood and steel, spanned the river. Men stood back, breathing hard, their eyes reflecting both exhaustion and disbelief. In hours that felt like minutes, the impossible had been done. Men who were trained to fight now had fought in another way, through ingenuity, precision, and unyielding resolve. The river, once a barrier, now welcomed them. They had created a path across fear, across danger, across impossibility itself. As dawn began to stain the horizon with the first hues of light, shadows receded and the river gleamed. Soldiers would soon march across this bridge, carrying not just arms, but the weight of a tactical revolution. The engineers had turned timber and cable into a weapon, and the enemy would soon awaken to the realization that their strongest natural defense had been defeated overnight. The camera lingers on the bridge, silhouetted against the growing sun, men standing victorious yet silent. The narrator concludes, voice low and reverent. This was no ordinary construction. This was a miracle wrought in mud, water, and sweat, a defiance of expectation, a triumph of human ingenuity under fire. And it would change the course of battles to come. The German reaction. The first rays of dawn pierced the morning mist, revealing the river in full clarity. Across the banks, German defenders stirred, their eyes widening in disbelief. What they had assumed was an impenetrable natural barrier now bore the unmistakable form of an American bridge, sleek, precise, and fully operational. They were supposed to be slow, methodical, predictable, the narrator intones, voice tight with tension. But these engineers had rewritten the rules overnight. Officers barked orders, binoculars trembling in their hands. Soldiers rushed to defensive positions, rifles and artillery aimed at the newly forged crossing, yet hesitation lingered. Confusion was a weapon as potent as any gun, and the Americans had wielded it with deadly effect. The Germans could not fathom how a team of men, working in darkness and silence, had defied the odds so completely. The bridge was no mere structure, it was a statement, a psychological shockwave that reverberated through the enemy's command. Messengers scrambled, radios crackled, and commands collided with reality. "They've crossed our river without firing a shot," a German officer reportedly muttered, disbelief echoing in his tone. "Impossible, how?" Meanwhile, across the river, American engineers watched silently, their faces streaked with mud and sweat, eyes scanning the enemy positions. They knew the danger wasn't over. Artillery could rain down at any moment. But for now, they had achieved the unthinkable, an entire division's route to maneuver, forged in the dead of night, invisible until it was complete. This wasn't a battle of bullets. It was a battle of wits, of nerves, of audacity. The Germans had expected an obstacle, a delay, perhaps a minor nuisance. Instead, they were confronted with mastery, precision under pressure, speed under threat, and ingenuity that defied comprehension. From the German side, soldiers tried to fire, but their aim was hesitant, their morale shaken. Each passing second, the bridge became more than wood and steel, it became a symbol of inevitability. The enemy realized that their defensive lines, their maps, their expectations, could be undone by a handful of determined men with tools, ingenuity, and nerves of steel. The camera pans across the river, capturing the full scope. American engineers, exhausted but triumphant, now joined by infantry beginning to pour across the bridge, moving like a tide they had summoned with their own hands. On the opposite bank, the Germans regroup, faces tight with tension, hearts pounding with the sudden awareness that the war had changed overnight. In that moment, the bridge was more than a crossing, it was a turning point. A lesson in daring and discipline. A humbling reminder that in war, imagination can be as lethal as firepower, and courage can be measured not just in bullets, but in blueprints and the willingness to act when the world expects an action. As the sun rises higher, the camera lingers on German soldiers, now frozen with a mixture of awe and fear. Across the river, American engineers retreat slightly, their work done, eyes scanning, always vigilant. Their victory is quiet, but its impact will echo across the battlefields for weeks to come. The Germans had been shocked awake by a force they never anticipated, not an army of men, but a handful of engineers armed with ingenuity and resolve. Overnight, the rules had changed, and the war would never look the same again. Marching across the bridge. The bridge quivered beneath the weight of boots and machinery, yet held firm, a testament to the engineers' meticulous planning. Soldiers marched in formation, rifles glinting in the morning sun, the rhythmic stomp of their feet echoing across the river valley like a drumbeat of inevitability. Each step was a declaration, the impossible had been made real. They crossed not just a river, but a boundary in their own minds. Where yesterday stood hesitation and doubt, today confidence and resolve surged. Infantry poured across, some carrying supplies, others heavy weapons, while armored vehicles rumbled cautiously behind, tires crunching gravel and steel treads hissing over the planks. Artillery pieces, dragged painstakingly into position, pointed across the river, ready to support the next phase of the assault. Every movement was choreographed yet frantic, balancing speed with precision. From the German lines, machine gun fire sporadically cracked the morning air, sending splinters of wood from the bridge into the river below. Soldiers ducked instinctively, adrenaline flooding their veins, but the Americans pressed forward, unflinching. The river was no longer a barrier, it had become a corridor of momentum, a stage for audacity and ingenuity to perform their deadly dance. With every crossing, the Americans weren't just advancing, they were rewriting the playbook of modern warfare. Speed, stealth, and the sheer nerve of those who dared to build in darkness now combined to overwhelm the enemy's defenses before they could fully react. Young soldiers, barely out of training, eyes wide but heart steady, felt the weight of history with each step. They had trusted the engineers' work, and that trust was repaid in solid oak and steel. The bridge didn't just carry men and machines, it carried the hope of victory, the embodiment of human ingenuity under fire. Meanwhile, German officers scrambled desperately to coordinate counterattacks. Their positions, once secure, were now exposed. Communications were frantic, messages arriving too late, orders colliding with chaos. Their formidable artillery could not depress quickly enough, and every hesitation allowed more American forces to spill across the river. The balance of power had shifted in a matter of hours, not days. The camera pans over the bridge, capturing the full drama, a column of infantry advancing, tanks rolling carefully, engineers moving alongside to monitor structural integrity, all against the backdrop of a river that yesterday represented impassable defense. Below, water churns violently around debris knocked loose by the occasional shell, emphasizing the danger that surrounds every step. Every footstep across that bridge was a testament not just to discipline, but to courage. Not just to planning, but to imagination. Here in this moment, war became a test of who could act faster, smarter, and with more daring than the enemy. As the final units reach the far bank, the camera lingers on the exhausted yet triumphant soldiers, eyes scanning for threats, shoulders tense but resolute. Their success is quiet, uncelebrated in the chaos of battle, yet monumental. They have crossed, and in doing so, they have altered the battlefield, and the minds of those who stand against them. The river, once a line of defense, now carried the tide of an unstoppable advance. Overnight, engineers and soldiers together had turned timber and steel into destiny, proving that in war, boldness can outweigh numbers, and ingenuity can redefine the very landscape of conflict. Securing the far bank was a crucible of uncertainty. Trees swayed over the muddy shoreline, shadows twisting with the early morning light. Smoke from distant artillery lingered in the air, a hazy reminder that the enemy had not yet surrendered. Every step off the bridge carried the weight of risk. One miscalculation, one hidden mine, and the carefully orchestrated advance could unravel in an instant. Crossing the river was only half the battle. To survive, to hold what had been won, the soldiers needed to seize every inch, transform the unknown into territory under their control. Infantry squads fanned out immediately, scanning tree lanes and broken ground. Eyes narrowed against the glare, ears straining for the faintest whisper of enemy movement. Machine guns rattled intermittently, suppressing potential threats, while riflemen advanced with calculated caution. Engineers, still at the ready, inspected the bridge's far end, ensuring it could bear the weight of incoming reinforcements and armored units. The far bank, though claimed, was not safe. Pockets of German resistance remained entrenched among ruins and fortifications. Sniper fire picked off exposed shoulders, artillery shells plowed through the soft earth, and yet the Americans pressed forward. Every action was choreographed, yet improvisation thrummed in every soldier's heartbeat. Here, courage met chaos. Every movement was measured, every breath a gamble. The river had been crossed, but the enemy still breathed, still plotted, still struck. Securing the far bank demanded more than muscle, it demanded nerves, wit, and relentless resolve. Armored vehicles began to roll over the bridge, treads rattling against wooden planks. Mortars were positioned to sweep possible counterattack routes. Supply trucks arrived, unloading ammunition and rations, while medics tended to the wounded, their presence a reminder that triumph and peril coexisted on the same muddy ground. Each arrival bolstered the Americans' foothold, gradually transforming vulnerability into strength. In the eyes of the soldiers, the far bank was more than a patch of earth, it was a promise. A promise that daring and ingenuity could bend reality, that a river, once a wall, could become a bridge to victory. Meanwhile, German forces scrambled to regroup, but confusion reigned. Orders collided, units overlapped, and morale began to falter. Their defensive line, once a symbol of dominance, was fractured. American artillery rumbled in the distance, and every incoming shell further cemented the untenable situation for the defenders. The camera pans over the bank, exhausted soldiers crouch behind barricades, scanning the tree line for threats. Engineers continue checking and reinforcing the bridge. Tanks slowly advance, their armor glinting in the morning sun. The river behind them shimmers, a silent witness to the audacity that had brought them here overnight. By securing the far bank, they had turned audacity into control. Timber and sweat had transformed into tactical advantage. A river had been conquered, not through brute force alone, but through vision, speed, and unyielding resolve. The Americans had claimed the ground and the momentum, and the battle for the river was now theirs to dictate. Repelling counterattacks, dawn had barely broken, but the far bank, though seized, was far from secure. The Americans' triumph over the river had drawn the sharpest attention of the enemy. From the shadows of shattered buildings and shell-scarred trees, German soldiers regrouped, their counterattack imminent. The tension was electric, a charged silence broken only by the distant hum of artillery and the clatter of trucks reinforcing the bridgehead. Victory is never given freely. Every advance invites a response, and every conquered riverbank becomes a target. The Americans had crossed overnight, but the enemy would not yield without fury. Machine guns barked to life, sweeping open fields as infantry pressed forward in coordinated waves. Explosions shook the earth, tossing mud and debris into the air. Soldiers dived behind hastily erected barricades, hearts pounding, fingers tight around rifles and grenades. Engineers quickly repositioned, transforming the bridge into a defensive chokepoint. Sandbags, barbed wire, and trenches emerged as if by magic, every improvisation a lifeline. Every soldier knew the cost of hesitation. One misstep, one exposed flank, and the river that had been their salvation could become their tomb. Yet, courage did not falter. They had built more than a bridge. They had forged a line of resistance stronger than steel alone. German infantry advanced in waves, supported by mortars and tanks hidden behind ruined structures. The air vibrated with tension, bullets and shrapnel slicing through the smoke-laden dawn. But American forces, battle-hardened and strategically positioned, held their ground. Precision fire, coordinated artillery, and relentless determination repelled each wave, turning what seemed like chaos into calculated countermeasures. The camera pans over individual acts of valor, a young soldier rifle raised, shields a wounded comrade, a sergeant yells commands over the roar of explosions, directing squads with calm precision. Engineers rush to repair a damaged section of the bridge even as shells strike nearby. Each frame tells the story of discipline, bravery, and the human spirit under fire. In these moments, the bridge was more than wood and steel. It became a symbol of defiance, a testament to ingenuity and willpower. To hold it was to fight for life, for comrades, for the momentum of the campaign itself. Shells exploded across the riverbank, sending dirt and timber into the air, yet American lines remained firm. Every repelled wave strengthened morale. The Germans, forced to retreat under withering fire, were confronted by a reality they hadn't anticipated. The overnight miracle was not just a crossing, it was an unbreakable foothold. By repelling counterattacks, the Americans turned a daring gamble into a lasting victory. Each shell, each bullet, each fearless advance reinforced their control. The river was no longer a barrier but a stage where ingenuity, courage, and relentless resolve had rewritten the rules of battle. The far bank was theirs, and the enemy had learned, at devastating cost, that innovation and audacity could not be undone overnight. Pushing the advance. The far bank was secure, but the battle had only begun. Smoke from burning barricades drifted across the river as American soldiers, fueled by adrenaline and determination, pressed forward. Every step beyond the bridge was a gamble. Each street, each building could hide the enemy's lethal intent. The narrator's voice cuts through, deliberate and gripping. Crossing a river is one thing. Advancing through enemy territory, under the weight of retaliation, is another. Yet the Americans moved forward, their momentum unbroken, their resolve absolute. Tanks rumbled into position, following the engineers who now shifted from builders to combatants, clearing debris and marking safe paths. Infantry squads fanned out, sweeping buildings and alleyways, weapons raised, eyes sharp for movement in shadows. The river behind them glimmered a reminder of both their audacious success and the vulnerability they had left behind. For every inch gained, the price could be paid in blood. Yet each advance carried a vital purpose, securing supply lines, establishing command posts, and pushing the Germans further from the river that had once constrained them. The bridge was no longer an end, it was the gateway to liberation. German defenders, battered and disoriented by the overnight crossing and failed counterattacks, regrouped in pockets of resistance. Mortars fired intermittently, artillery boomed from distant hills, and machine gun nests raked advancing lines. But American forces, operating with seamless coordination and hard-won confidence, adapted instantly. Scouts relayed positions, snipers neutralized key threats, squads used smoke and terrain to advance under cover. Close-up scenes highlight human courage. A young private presses forward despite a grazing wound. A squad leader steadies trembling recruits, guiding them past a ruined factory. Engineers, having just fought off a counterattack, now lay planks across a bombed-out street to maintain momentum. Each act is a testament to improvisation, bravery, and relentless drive. Every advance was a calculated risk, every movement a negotiation with death itself. But they carried more than weapons. They carried ingenuity, training, and the unyielding belief that speed and audacity could overcome even the strongest defenses. The streets of the town become a cinematic battlefield. Explosions light the morning fog, smoke curls around shattered walls, soldiers shout orders over the roar of engines and gunfire. Yet, for every obstacle, the Americans adapt, bridges repaired, barricades dismantled, roads cleared. Each success feeds the next, the push forward creating a chain reaction of tactical advantage. By pushing beyond the bridge, they transformed a single overnight feat into a campaign-wide ripple. The river that once hemmed them in was now a springboard. Every step forward carried the legacy of ingenuity, courage, and teamwork, and proved that in war, momentum is as lethal as any weapon. The advance continued, relentless and unstoppable, as American engineers and soldiers alike turned the extraordinary into the everyday. Consolidation and supply lines. The bridge now stood firm behind them, a testament to ingenuity and speed. Beholding the far bank required more than bravery. It demanded logistics, coordination, and relentless vigilance. American engineers and soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, turning a daring overnight success into a sustainable foothold. The narrator's voice cuts through the haze of gunpowder and smoke. Crossing a river was only the beginning. To hold it, they needed supplies, ammunition, and reinforcements. Every plank, every truck, every soldier counted. The bridge had to become a lifeline, not just a passage. Convoys rumbled across the wooden span, engines straining under the weight of fuel, food, and weapons. Engineers worked tirelessly alongside them, reinforcing weak points, replacing damaged sections, and erecting temporary defensive structures. Each truck that rolled across carried not just material, but the hope of continued advance. The camera lingers on soldiers carrying heavy crates, mud and blood clinging to their uniforms. Their faces show fatigue, but determination burns in their eyes. A medic tends to a wounded infantryman. A young engineer wipes sweat from his brow and signals a convoy to move. Every act, every gesture, underscores the human cost behind the technical achievement. The far bank was a prize worth every ounce of effort, but it was also a target. German forces were regrouping, their artillery zeroing in on the bridge. Every truck, every soldier, every engineer was in the crosshairs. One mistake could undo the miracle of the night before. Smoke rises from distant shell impacts, shrapnel tearing through makeshift barricades. But American forces respond with precision. Anti-tank guns are positioned along the edges, snipers take high vantage points, engineers improvise explosive traps and reinforcement beams. The combination of technical skill and human courage transforms vulnerability into resilience. Close-ups emphasize the stakes. A supply officer adjusts his binoculars, tracking enemy movement. A sergeant pushes a stalled truck across the rickety span. Engineers replace a cracked beam with hands shaking from exhaustion. Each scene conveys that consolidation is not passive. It is active, dangerous, and essential. Bridges are more than wood and nails. They are the arteries of war. And those who guard them, who keep them alive under fire, become unsung heroes. Every successful convoy, every repaired section of planking, every defended checkpoint ensured that the army could march onward, pushing the front deeper into enemy territory. The cinematography pans across the river at dawn, showing a continuous stream of vehicles, soldiers, and supplies moving steadily, as if the bridge itself were a living organism, pulsing with purpose. Smoke curls over shattered buildings, yet the Americans advance. The river is no longer a boundary. It is a conduit of power, strategy, and human ingenuity. What began as a daring overnight feat now became a campaign's backbone. The bridge was more than timber and iron. It was a symbol of resilience, coordination, and unyielding will. It turned fleeting courage into lasting advantage, proving that in war, mastery of movement and supply can be as decisive as any firefight. The far bank was secure, and the advance continued relentlessly, unstoppable, and alive with human determination. The river now lies quiet under the first light of dawn. The bridge, still creaking from the night's ceaseless activity, stretches across the water like a lifeline carved from courage. Smoke drifts from distant skirmishes, but here on this narrow span of wood and steel, there is triumph, a hard-won victory that whispers of ingenuity and sacrifice. They called it impossible. They said it couldn't be done. And yet, in the span of a single night, men turned timber, engines, and determination into a weapon more potent than bullets. The power to move an army, to defy odds, to rewrite the map of battle. Close-ups show exhausted engineers leaning against splintered beams, hands black with grease and sweat, faces lined with fatigue and resolve. Soldiers march steadily across the bridge, carrying not only weapons and supplies but the weight of history on their shoulders. Each step resonates like a heartbeat, a pulse of human will driving forward. This was more than a bridge. It was a symbol of ingenuity, calculations, improvisation, and speed fused with courage. Every plank laid, every bolt tightened, every convoy that crossed under fire was a testament to skill honed under pressure. The enemy may have dominated the landscape, but here, the Americans dominated the moment. Wide shots capture the river itself, reflecting the morning sun. The currents flow gently now, but yesterday they roared with the chaos of battle. The camera pans to the far bank, where troops regroup, fortify, and push onward, transforming a fleeting engineering miracle into a lasting tactical advantage. And yet, for all the strategy, for all the technical brilliance, it was human hearts that turned possibility into reality. The soldiers and engineers, the planners and laborers were the unseen force beneath every girder, the silent rhythm beneath every march. Courage, determination, and teamwork built this bridge, and through it, they carried victory. Close-ups linger on small details. A soldier pats a weary engineer on the back. A young officer checks his watch as supplies roll steadily onward. A child in a nearby village watches the stream of soldiers with awe. These moments remind us that war is fought not only with weapons but with the human spirit. In the heart of darkness, under the eyes of a vigilant enemy, they built more than a bridge. They built hope, mobility, and an unbreakable will. Overnight, they defied impossibility, proving that in war, it is not just firepower or numbers that prevail, but ingenuity, courage, and a relentless drive to keep moving forward. The bridge remains, silent and proud, a monument to those who dared to build the impossible, and to the human spirit that carried them across. The camera pulls back slowly, showing the bridge in full, sunlight glinting off its timbers, soldiers crossing steadily, and the river flowing beneath. The frame lingers, letting the weight of the achievement settle in. This was not just an engineering triumph, it was a testament to the intersection of human skill, daring, and determination that turned a river into a pathway of victory.